Last summer, I began following a slew of indie games as developers were advertising their games through Twitter around the time of the Summer Games Fest. Among other games such as Lightspeed Lena, Dual Corp, and Free Jack Online, there was this game that featured some fun movement in the 3D space that looked like a game you would have seen on the PS1. The visuals and gameplay piqued my interest, so I ended up following the game's ongoing development, and a few weeks later, a game known as Pseudoregalia was released. Now, you may be saying, Delstar, I looked through your abundance of super awesome and well-made videos, and I don't remember seeing anything about Pseudoregalia, so how could this be a revisit? I beat this game the day after it came out, and alongside my Sonic Unleashed review, a review of Pseudoregalia was something that I wanted to do because I felt so strongly about this game at the time and thought it deserved a lot of attention. Unfortunately, that never happened, and a year came and went. The game received a big update a few months ago, and has been a huge success. It's only made me want to talk about it that much more, so here I am, 1 year later, finally reviewing Pseudoregalia. The story of Pseudoregalia was something I didn't catch the very first time I played. I originally thought that the character you play, revealed as Sybil, was the person trying to escape this dreamlike world, trapped by some unknown being represented as a princess. Coming back to this game a year later, this game's story is so unbelievably clear that I was embarrassed upon remembering that I didn't understand the story at all in my first playthrough. The actual story is that the princess is an unknown lady who was conjured up this dream world as an escape from her real life. Sybil enters this world to help the woman by defeating the princess, waking the woman up, who then ponders what she's going to do with her real life now that she's free from the prison she put herself in. The story is all around you as you play. Speaking to these little goat-looking creatures that bear resemblance to Sybil reveals a little bit more about the world as you progress. Some apologize for circumstances out of their control. Others tell the tale of previous beings defying the princess and meeting their demise. In certain areas, such as the theater, they will tell you that things are closed until repairs are done. The dialogue from each of these little guys goes hand in hand with the world itself. When you hear talk about a princess, a castle, and a theater in the dream world, you think of something whimsical and vibrant, right? Well, outside of the beautiful looking skies, the many different places inside the castle walls are anything but whimsical. From the desolate and eerie underbelly to the emptiness of the Sensa Keep, the world inside these castle walls feels incomplete. Cages and jails are strewn about. Places like the library are unkempt, the theater is abandoned, and pits of an unknown substance capable of harming the player are everywhere, not to mention the multitude of enemies that fire on you at sight. It feels like the princess had major ambitions for this place to be more than what it was, but her desire to escape from reality stifled the creation of a robust world. I love the world building in this game. It's not something that screams, "Look at our awesome world, please look at it." They give you this place to explore and come to your own conclusions. Even though I like this aspect of the story, I personally felt like the ending was a bit flat. I feel like the princess's plight could have been better set up and shown throughout the story. She's mentioned in passing very briefly a few times, and then you just fight her at the end. Her pondering what she'll do next with her life was interesting. The uncertainty of real life led to her escaping from reality in the first place. She can always relapse and fall back into the darkness of her mind, but she can also find a better way to deal with her problems. It's interesting to think about what her life could be like after Sybil saves her. Speaking of Sybil, her origins are largely unknown. I came across a comment, but I don't remember if it was from the Steam community or a YouTube comment, but someone theorized that Sybil is this being who can enter people's minds and free them from their mental plight. I thought that was a cool headcanon as it reminded me of Knights, a being who helps people overcome their fears through facing them in their dreams. One of the creators of this game hinted that we may see Sybil again in the future, and I'd like to see how that plays out. All in all, the story for Pseudoregalia is good. I always get a kick out of stories being told through the gameplay. Some of my favorite games of all time do this, and Pseudoregalia is no exception. I wasn't around for the PS1 era of games, but through the beautiful power of technology, I've been able to go back and play a few of those games and watch other people play them online. This game looks very nostalgic, but beyond that, I love the environments. The listless library feels lonely, and it's backed by music that feels like something out of a 90s anime during an emotional scene. This place is obviously meant to be so much more, but the princess just couldn't find it in herself to make the library look the best it could. The Twilight Theater has a comfortable vibe, but it's contrasted by the music that initially sounds groovy, but if you pay attention to the percussion of the song, it's intentionally offbeat at certain parts. Plenty of people talk about the theater being a pain in the ass to get through, and hearing the song as you die over and over again goes from a song that you can groove to on the surface to one that feels a little maddening to listen to. The underbelly almost feels like an entirely different world. Here is where you'll come across almost suffocating linear pathways and a few giant open areas just waiting for you to fuck up and fall to your death. Coming to the underbelly without the proper upgrade is scary as shit. There are a few instances of incomplete structures within the underbelly, and as the menacing beat mixed with an ominous hum plays in the background, I found myself thinking about what this could have been for. I won't go through every area of this castle, but there's a lot of observations to be made about their designs, and how the developers managed to create a place where nothing matches but fits together perfectly. The game's general style is inspired by something called Art Deco, and upon learning this, my reaction was, "What the fuck is that?" The skinny is that Art Deco's style relies on the repetitive use of simplistic shapes to create refined looking patterns and objects. My mind immediately went to something like a checkerboard when I looked up the definition. You learn something new every day. Pseudoregalia's use of Art Deco fits its PS1 retro look perfectly. Seeing refined patterns on generally unfinished architecture once again adds to the environmental storytelling. The music is also incredible. The soundtrack gave me Heavy Nights into Dreams vibes. It's chaotic, melodic, each song fits their respective settings properly, and listening to certain songs outside of the game lets me catch some details I didn't notice before. The composers who created this wonderful soundtrack, Potato Tetto, Still Crisp, and whatever the name of this emoticon is, because simply saying +W+ out loud sounds dumb, so that can't be it, deserve all the praise they get and more. Incredible music, standing ovation type shit. I almost forgot to talk about Sybil's design. This is actually one of the very best designs I've ever seen for any character in any medium. There's a reason why so many people are, let's just say, enamored by her design. She looks great, and the developers knew this, so they gave Sybil many different outfits that can be unlocked through completing time trials around the castle. I didn't unlock them all in this run, but the ones I did get looked fantastic. The professional and guardian outfits are personal favorites of mine. Movement in a third-person game is everything. I can live with a few exceptions to the rule, but Pseudoregalia proved itself to be the standard of that rule. Starting out, Sybil is unremarkable by herself. She can do a backflip if you hop forward and hold back while pressing the jump button. Jumping while crouching achieves the same effect. Nothing special. Once you start getting some movement upgrades, that's when the game becomes cracked. The very first upgrade you earn is the slide. Pretty standard, but immediately allows for faster travel, but something is missing. At first, some players might not feel it, but people who've been around the block can feel the stiffness of the slide by itself. The description for it even says that the move is incomplete. Usually, games have sliding as an extra movement tool, something that isn't necessary, but you're better off putting it to use than not if applicable. It isn't until you get the ability to jump out of the slide that you feel the full effects of the mechanic, and it feels freeing. It's exhilarating jumping around at high speeds with a great sense of control most of the time. There are definitely a few times where I felt like Icarus and flew too close to the sun, but mistakes are usually your own fault when moving around in this game. Alongside the slide jump, you could find other abilities such as wall kicking, which allows you to wall jump up to 3 times plus 1 if you get the extra ability. You could find the ability to throw your weapon, the breaker sword. There's a ground pound that you can high jump out of. You can use the wall kick to kick your sword. You can throw your sword, charge up for a heavy hitting attack, have your attacks bounce you off enemies, and wall riding. Even though I felt like I searched all over the castle, it doesn't even feel like I got all the movement upgrades, but that doesn't matter because you can get through this entire game without having to use most of these abilities even once. For example, there's an area outside the theater where you must scale the castle wall to get to a higher area. In my first playthrough a year ago, I was stuck at this part for over 30 minutes. I went mad trying to get through this part, and I managed to find the wall riding ability before taking this on, so it should have been more easy, right? No, it turns out I was just the worst gamer back then because I crushed this section on my second playthrough in one go without wall riding. If you have the 4 wall kicks and slide jumping, you're good to go. I also used the first person mode in this area, as right before it, you get the sword throwing ability. Platforming in the first person felt a little daunting, but completing Cluster Truck prepared me for moments like this. Wall kicking in first person feels good. It's easier to rebound off the same wall while in this perspective compared to third person. Messing up can make it feel really disorienting though, so I don't recommend first person use for the entire game, but it's not a bad idea. I'm sure someone has done a speedrun of this already. There are plenty of times where having the wall riding ability certainly makes things easier, but having some other upgrades like bouncing off enemies and objects, and the wall kicks makes it so that you're free to navigate these spaces in any way you want. There were some places where I felt like it was simply impossible without some abilities, but insane movement tech by other gamers proved me wrong almost immediately. I recommend watching movement guides and speedruns of this game. The shit people do while moving through the castle left me in awe. My favorite aspect of the gameplay aside from the incredible freedom of movement is its non-linear structure. You're free to explore any part of the castle at any time the second you leave the dilapidated dungeon. In fact, it's almost too free. Having not played this game in a year led to a good chunk of time wasted by aimless wandering. They added an ability called Memento that allows you to see certain sections of the overall map depending on where you are. Aside from that, there's no indication of any hidden areas, goodies, or where the abilities might be on the map. There's not even an indication for where the player is aside from highlighting the room you're currently in. I'm not saying I needed the map to show me where everything was since exploration is the point, but not even showing me where I am is odd. The castle isn't big enough to the point where you will truly ever be lost, but you will feel the amount of time it takes for you to get from point A to point B. It gets easier when you have the upgrades, but without them, I don't think it would have hurt to give some sort of indication as to where the jump slide ability is, and then from that point, letting players freely explore. I respect the aversion to hand holding, but a nudge in some areas would have been nice. Players trying this game out for the very first time might feel easily lost, and it's one of the game's very few problems. With that being said, use the camera. It's not just good for looking at Sybil at certain angles. Moving the camera every which way in any given room will lead to a discovery being made, something you can easily access with just a slide, something you can get to without using wall kicks or wall riding. You're dropped in a fucked up looking castle with no indication of where to go for anything. The camera is your best friend. Having a good sense of direction is also imperative for this game. As mentioned before, the map doesn't show an icon for Sybil at any point. You must keep track of where you entered a room. Using the map when moving between areas is a good way to show where you are in the room, and knowing your rights from your lefts will save a lot of time. Not having an icon for Sybil present on the map just doesn't make any sense. All navigation problems are instantly solved by having one. The game also features combat and a healing system. Once you have the breaker, attacking enemies fills up a bar at the top left of the screen. Holding the B button heals you, and you can use up more than one section of the bar to heal yourself from low to full health if needed. The combat is nothing special. You can get it upgraded, and I think it's meant to deal more damage, but I never saw this come to fruition for me at any point. There's also a lock-on mode, but you'll only ever know this by messing around with the controls. Maybe I missed something that explains it because, like I said, I still haven't fully explored the entire castle. Combat only really gets intensive during the final boss. Mixing your movement and combat abilities makes for a thrilling fight, and I wish there were more bosses in the game. There's only one true boss aside from the final, and it's at the start. I feel like every section should have had a boss, but this also fits with the castle's incomplete form, so from a story perspective, it's interesting that there aren't more. But maybe the devs just didn't want to make it a focal point of the game. I ain't mad at that, because at the end of the day, Pseudoregalia is one of the best video games I've ever played regardless. This game does so much well. Its story is omnipresent, the music is incredible, and the gameplay is fluid. There's not much outside of basic navigation that this game gets wrong. You can complete this game in a few short hours too. My first playthrough was about 8 hours, and my second playthrough was about half that time, and that's coming off of not playing it for an entire year. Despite completing the game in 4 hours, I was engrossed in the experience. I don't care if a game is 4 hours or 44 hours. If it keeps me engaged through every session, the length doesn't matter. Pseudoregalia is a ton of fun. This will be a game I recommend to people for years to come. I'm curious to see what the developers create next. If I find it interesting, I'll be sure to give it the attention I feel it deserves, just like Pseudoregalia. Shout out to you for watching. Check out my channel for more great video game reviews. See ya.